Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is DreamFiction and today we will be reading the story Issei, the True Dragon of the Apocalypse, translated into English by Jyanzein. This has really given me a disconnect, Issei commented as he rode his motorcycle back to Kuo, carrying Penemu on his back. I think it's been a great day and I really feel excellent to continue my training. Issei added, sketching a small smile. Although, I still keep thinking that I would have liked to stay longer together. It's been quite nice being on the beach with you. He concluded, slightly surprised when he felt Penemu wrap her arms around his waist and pull his body together with hers. Do you want to know how I felt? Or rather, how I feel? Kadre asked, receiving a quick nod from Issei. I feel a very strong heartbeat under my skin. And it's my heart, it's beating so hard because you make me feel. Penemu would position her chin on her future lover's shoulder. Like I'm alive again. Issei couldn't help but blush slightly at her words, though that blush quickly dissipated when he looked at the fallen's face. With her eyes closed and that beautiful smile on her face as her long silky hair swayed before the wind. She seemed to be so happy and relaxed, something Issei never saw in Penemu. Perhaps, he was really making her feel alive again. And he could not be more than happy for the happiness of a woman he admires and likes so much. Yes, he wished more and more that this unique day could have been extended for several more days. And he was not the only one who thought the same. Chapter 29. The Other Bishop. Issei and Penemu entered the old academy building to see how Tiamat seemed to be flipping through Issei's photo album energetically, sitting on top of the main desk. Hello. Issei greeted quickly, at the same time as Penemu raised her hand with little energy, doing her typical salute. Tiamat lowered the album from her face, causing both Penemu and Issei to be shocked by the great vigor and cute smile the dragoness gave off. Welcome back. The dragoness exclaimed with much happiness. What did you do this last day? Penemu asked, unable to help but raise an eyebrow. You look revitalized. About what we talked about the other day. Tiamat ignored Penemu's question outright, causing the fall to raise her eyebrow even more. He is in the last room of the institution. He has various seals, but I've already taken care of destroying them. Only the locks are missing. Explained the dragoness, causing Issei to look at her with great surprise. Wait, are you telling me that they're locking a person in the hallway that I was forbidden to transit? Issei asked, astonished at the information. It's not a person, it's a demon. Tiamat made her disgust towards the species quite clear. But, it's kind of strange, the dragoness commented, lowering her gaze slightly. What strangeness are we talking about, exactly? Penemu asked, crossing her arms. Well, for starters, his demonic aura isn't the same as the others. Tiamat raised her gaze, looking very seriously at the two of them. In fact, it's not only very different, it's almost non-existent. Like it's broken, so to speak. That explains why you couldn't feel his presence all this time, Penemu explained, rubbing her chin. Does that mean what's potentially dangerous? Issei wondered with a hand on his chin. That would explain the reason for his confinement. I don't think so, Tiamat commented, staring at him. It's precisely because his aura is different that I didn't sense any prominent hostility or malice from him. A look with a hint of compression appeared on the dragoness's face. In fact, I felt that he was afraid of himself. Issei rubbed his temple at the information gathered, wondering what the motive was for withholding such valuable information from her. Maybe he was getting himself into big trouble and would really take the punishment if something bad happened, but he knew very well that Tiamat couldn't be getting confused. For that reason, if things turned out as he thought they would, Riaz would have to give him an explanation, and a very good one, in fact. Issei finally put his annoyance aside, rushing towards the mysterious room. I'll be right back. He shouted, leaving both women alone. Tiamat lifted the album again and continued to look through the few pictures in there, something Penemu quickly joined her in. I guess we're thinking the same thing, Penemu commented, smiling a rather loving smile on her face as she ran a finger over the photo of her beloved as a small kid. Issei when he was a kid. Yes, yes. Tiamat nodded several times with great joy. Issei's children will be much like them. The dragoness exclaimed with great happiness. She hugged Penemu with utmost intensity. Imagine if we had. Tiamat's words stopped as different thoughts of both women synchronized, caring for their young children and hugging with Issei. Somehow, that made both of them a little disappointed. Tiamat broke away from Penemu, lowering her gaze with some pain. I'm sorry. It's okay. Kadre replied, giving her a small smile. I think everyone needs dreams to be happier, even if they can't be fulfilled. A small smile appeared on Tiamat's face after what she heard, then she looked at one of the pictures. She turned the page, seeing the photo where she and Penemu appeared together with the love of her life, celebrating his birthday. Oblivious to all the chatter between the two women in love, Issei arrived at the room in chains, preparing to smash the locks. He couldn't help but be surprised when said chains were much sturdier than they appeared. These are magic chains. It's a type of seal, one of the simplest and weakest, Drake commented through the gauntlet. Although they are the weakest, you need a great deal of power to break them. Luckily, your training has made the power and mastery over your balance breaker near perfect. It's time to put the training to the test, he finished with some emotion in his final words. Issei activated his balance breaker and the augmentations began to silently glow on the gem of his gauntlet at an impressive speed, causing Issei himself to blink in utter surprise at the increase in power so quickly. The gem finished flickering within seconds, indicating that the dominance over his sacred gear had also increased noticeably, making the boosts much faster. Amazing, Issei thought, clenching his fist. I feel like I'm twice as strong as I was last month, even a little more. It's not just that, Drake commented quickly, causing Issei to look down at his gauntlet. In your training, you doubled the amount of your magic reserves. Now, with a much higher boost limit and control over your balance breaker, I estimate that the balance breaker's time in battle increased from 8 minutes to over 20 hours, as long as you don't waste your magic, of course. That means that now I could take advantage of the extended battles and it wouldn't be a negative point for me anymore, Issei commented, feeling happy at what he heard. I see you caught on fast. Drake commented with a proud tone, then turned serious. Now, concentrate on opening that door and get ready, just in case. Issei just nodded at his tenant's warning and took it quickly. His firm and tense posture was proof of that. Issei took the chain and stared at the doors for a few seconds until he finally ripped them off from one second to the next, causing a giant blizzard to be created in the hallway that rattled the glass. Issei slowly opened the door without even making the slightest noise. What he first distinguished was that everything was pitch black, but thanks to his demonic vision he could witness the room. Is it a bedroom? Was the only deduction he drew from looking at the decorations. The place looked somewhat gothic, which made him have a small shiver, which only intensified further when he heard a voice come from nowhere. Looks like it's really windy today. Issei turned his head in several directions frantically, trying to find the source of the voice. Well, it's not something I really care about. The voice sounded somewhat scary and a bit etchy, and that itself made Issei alert. This guy is a lot tougher than I thought. This time, Issei could make out the direction of the voice, so it didn't take him long to fix his gaze on a small box. Is it in there? He wondered internally, only to hear different buttons. Is he playing on a console? He wondered again, thinking that such a mysterious and sinister voice doesn't suit him at all to play that kind of games. Still, Issei didn't get confident, so he slowly approached the box to then bring his hand just as slowly. Sweat began to bead on his face as he listened to different murmurs and as the buttons were pressed. Finally, Issei removed the box in one motion to then instantly get into a combat stance, waiting for any kind of aggressive reaction. After a second, Issei could only make a pouty face at the sight of a blond boy slightly smaller than him wearing women's clothing. The boy's eyes quickly filled with tears, then he let out a loud scream and threw the console at his face, causing Issei to fall to the ground after such a blow. Stay away, he shouted, standing at the farthest point from him, still being inside the strange bedroom. Hey, calm down. Issei replied with slight anger, while rubbing his red face. I'm not going to hurt you. That's not the problem. Hearing that, Issei couldn't help but take a step back. I don't want to hurt you. Hurt me? Issei wondered internally. If it's a reincarnated demon, it must have a sacred gear. Probably, he can't control it. We'd better advance with caution, the dragon commented cautiously. Also, I can sense that he's a half-vampire. Drake added, causing Issei to widen his eyes in great disbelief. I understood that they had disappeared 1,000 years ago, after the Great Holy War. It was one of the many species that was wiped out by Trihexa, or so I thought, the dragon concluded, causing Issei to become slightly serious. I guess that's not important now. The problem is his sacred gear, since I don't know what it can do. Issei replied, causing the boy to cover his eyes with his hands at the mention of his sacred gear. Please go away, the boy commented, denoting that his somber voice was only due because he was inside a box. I don't want to hurt you. I can't control myself. What happened? Penemu came running up. That's it. Issei bumped his palm with his fist. You could help us. Hearing this, Penemu couldn't help but tilt her head slightly and blinked in confusion, then looked at the boy, who covered his face again after catching the cadre's gaze. I see, Penemu commented, then approached the child. Wait, don't come. The blonde frantically waved his hands. Penemu cared little for his warnings, approaching him and grabbing his arm, causing her to grit her teeth slightly as she felt everything slow down, as well as feeling heavier. Still, the power that emanated from the boy was very weak for the cadre's level, so she crouched down smoothly and looked him face to face, causing the blonde to be shocked to see that Penemu barely seemed to be affected. What is this? Issei wondered, trying to enter the small gray-colored capsule that had formed in the room. Don't go in. Penemu exclaimed quickly, causing Issei to jump backwards. It's some kind of control in time or space or both. It doesn't affect you only if you're strong enough to withstand it. She concluded, then looked at the boy. What's your name? Penemu's serious, somber look made the blonde begin to shiver. Georgia Gasper. He shouted. Gasper Vladi. The Vladis. I thought they were dead. Penemu wondered aloud, then gave him a death glare. Are you lying to me? Gasper could feel his entire spine shiver deeply behind the cadre's gaze and aura. And then no. The half-vampire could barely vocalize. I swear. Penemu brought her face close to Gasper's, narrowing her eyes with great suspicion. The boy began to tremble at the intense stare. Finally, Penemu's gaze softened noticeably and she released him. You're too much of a scaredy cat. She concluded, causing Gasper to lower his head as comical tears threatened to peel from his eyes. Surely that's the reason you can't control your power. Hearing this, Gasper couldn't help but look at her in surprise. If you can't even control your own emotions, how? She asked, causing the half-vampire to lower his head and clench his fist slightly. Penemu turned around and started to walk away. I don't plan on wasting my time with a scaredy cat. This only made Gasper clench his fists tighter. As the cadre passed by Issei's side, she whispered to him in one swift motion. If he learns how to control his emotions, he will learn how to control his power. I threatened and ridiculed him to see how his power fluctuated and he is extremely unstable, not only because of his emotions, but because of the absurd amount of magic he possesses. No wonder the demons gave up so quickly. Cadre fixed her gaze for a short second on Issei. But you won't give up, will you? She concluded. Where are you going? Issei asked, watching as the cadre raised her hand in a gesture of greeting. Tiamat left a little while ago because she had forgotten something at your house and she seemed to be quite nervous, though she was trying to hide it. She commented, then put both her hands in her pockets and stopped at the end of the hallway to give him one last look. I'll go see if she needs any help and then I'll do my job. You know well how the castle is managed. She concluded, then left. Finally, Issei and Gasper looked at each other, causing the latter to cover his face with the console. I guess this is going to be a long day, Issei thought with great boredom. Several minutes later. Issei found that it wasn't too difficult to strike up a conversation with Gasper as long as he kept his distance. In fact, the boy seemed quite receptive and welcomed all the small talk propitiated by him, something that even surprised him. Sir, Gasper tried to speak. Issei Haidu. He introduced himself, causing a small smile to appear on the half-vampire's face. Haidu, may I know why you want to help me? He asked, lowering his head slightly. Well, haven't you been lonely all this time? Issei asked, receiving a quick negative from Gasper. I don't. He replied. I know that if I stay here, I won't cause trouble for the others, he replied, lowering his head again. I don't want to hurt people, and the president said that the only thing I could do was to stay here as something had gone wrong with my reincarnation and they had no idea how to help me. Afterwards, I could hear through the door that something had gone wrong as I hadn't changed in the slightest and that I was still a coward. Issei couldn't help but frown at this. She told him that. He thought, but quickly put the issue on the back burner. It doesn't matter what they said. Living cooped up isn't living. I've been alone for a long time too, and for that reason I don't recommend it in the least. But, it would be very selfish to want to be with others while hurting them, he commented, lowering his head again, something that was beginning to annoy Issei. Can you at least tell me that you tried to control the overflows of your magic, or do you even know what magic is? He asked, then rolling his eyes at Gasper's extremely cowardly reaction. No. He shouted. Magic scares me. Magic scares you? Issei asked, receiving a quick nod from Gasper. Then let me show you something cool. He concluded, causing Gasper to look at him with rapt attention as he stood up. Issei raised his hand, creating an orb of violet energy. This made Gasper look at him with great intrigue. Can you use magic without conjuring it? The half-vampire asked, impressed at the sight. I don't know if you noticed, but every time you used your power, you weren't even using a magic circle. Let's say this is something similar, although I'm not providing the magic to my sacred gear, like you are. Issei explained, unable to help but look at him with a bit of envy. Honestly, I'm very envious of you. I had to learn all the principles of magic before I could use it because my magic reserves back then were meager. Although now they're no big deal either, he finished, rubbing his hair nervously at his last words. Gasper stood up and looked closely at the orb, seeing that it appeared to be completely harmless. Do you want to touch it? Issei asked, causing Gasper to look at him with great concern. But if I get close? Don't worry. He replied quickly. I'm the one proposing to approach you. So, if anything happens to me, it will be my fault and mine alone. If you put it that way, the blonde commented, slowly approaching Issei. His gaze seemed so focused on the orb that he didn't think much of Issei and didn't get nervous. His curiosity was probably piqued at the moment. Apparently, they didn't even take the time to train it. This is obvious, because he should at least know how magic works. Issei thought, seeing that Gasper looked rather hesitant. "Touch it, I promise it won't hurt you." Issei commented with a smile, causing Gasper to look at him uneasily. "Trust me." Hearing his last words, Gasper swallowed hard and slowly brought his trembling hand to the orb, then lightly touched its surface. He widened his eyes in complete shock when he felt no pain whatsoever. In fact, the texture felt as if it were that of a slime. Gasper thrust his entire hand into the orb, causing a huge smile to appear on his face, as his eyes sparkled with great excitement. "Wow!" he exclaimed in complete excitement. "How is this possible?" "As I said before, you lack learning the principles of magic," Issei commented. "As long as you want to use magic without wanting to harm anyone, it will simply be so. Though it is strange to do so, since you generally use magic for hostile purposes or as you do in your case, for defensive purposes." Seeing that Gasper seemed very interested in the subject, Issei decided to continue. There were also different types of magics, or rather, functions for magic. Those different functions can be provided through a sacred gear, by healing factors, by having a lineage with extraordinary powers, among others. You are like me, because, as far as I know, we both have sacred gears, and we both have a healing factor. Though the latter is possessed by all beings who know how to use magic, being pretty useless if you don't have a lineage or sacred gear that boosts that ability. A small, somewhat nostalgic smile appeared on Issei's face after remembering his beginnings in the supernatural world. "The one who taught me all that was my first mistress." "Your first mistress?" Gasper asked, still waving his hand inside the orb. "Does that mean you had more than one?" "I had two in total," Issei replied. "The first is a dragon named Tiamat and the second is the cadre you met a few moments ago, Penemu. I also met another dragon named Tannen, though he wasn't a master rather, he was Penemu's assistant as he followed all of her orders." He concluded, then looked at the blonde with a chuckle. "What do you say, you want me to teach you how to use your magic?" Another large gleam appeared in Gasper's eyes. "I could really do that?" he asked with complete excitement. "Of course," Issei exclaimed with complete confidence. "This, and much more." Issei crouched down in front of him, removing the orb. "I'm sure you learn it much faster than me. After all, you can already use magic." Gasper clenched his fists tightly. "That sounds great. Did you notice something?" Issei asked, causing Gasper to look at him curiously. "I'm close to you, and you haven't done anything to me." Hearing this, the half-vampire couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock. "That means if you can control it. You just have to get that feeling of insecurity out of your system and start believing in yourself more." Issei put on a serious face, causing Gasper to look at him sharply. "To me, everyone calls me the weakest security, something that can sap one's faith in oneself without a problem. But despite that, I will never stop believing in myself and I will never stop believing in the two women who also believed in me. The leader of the fallen also believes in me, in my future. That is why even in these circumstances is that I have such a strong spirit because I believe in myself and also because there are many people who supported me and are always by my side. That alone makes me feel like the strongest entity in the world even though I'm pretty far from it." Issei positioned a hand on Gasper's shoulder, unable to help but hand him a smile when he saw that strange grey aura was not generated around him. "For that reason, it's never good to be alone. If you're not like me and you don't think you can be strong, that's fine, I totally understand. But then, lean on the people you love the most and become strong thanks to them and above all, because of them." I don't know what to say," the blonde commented, completely awed by his words. Issei sketched a small smile, positioning a hand on Gasper's head. "You can call me Issei." Several minutes later. Issei looked out the window, seeing that it was already getting dark. Still, he was quite entertained by Gasper's chatter as the half-vampire attempted to materialize an orb of magic. I did it," Gasper exclaimed with great joy, causing Issei to look up at him with a smile. "That's great." Issei's eyes widened in great disbelief as he saw how the magical orb was twice the size of Gasper. Incredible, this last word he kept to himself, completely in awe of what the blonde could become capable of. Gasper stuck both of his arms inside the large orb, being able to make out that the material was much thicker and more sensitive than Issei's, something that pleased him quite a bit. "You see?" said Issei, approaching Gasper. "I told you you could do it." Gasper just nodded with a big smile. "It's a little late now, but wouldn't you like to get out of this room tomorrow?" he asked, being able to see how Gasper looked completely reluctant at the idea. "I don't mean going out in Kuo," he quickly added. "I mean a place where there are no people. It's a forest in hell that is known to the familiars who live there. In itself, it is called the familiar realm. That's where I met Tiamat, you might as well know her as my familiar. Issei moved quickly to his ear. Though the latter part, it remains only between us. As she is a dragon, she does not like to be subdued under any circumstances. He whispered with slight grace. He knew that if Tiamat was listening to him now, he would have taken a hard blow to the head. An angry dragoness Gasper thought aloud in fear as he imagined a huge dragon spitting fire out of its mouth. That was a common thing, being that he didn't even know what Tiamat looked like, let alone that the more evolved dragons should and could turn into humans to mating. So, what do you say? Issei asked, causing Gasper to look at him a bit doubtfully. Are you sure there won't be people? The blonde asked. The place where we'll be staying is strictly forbidden to transit it because of Issei couldn't help but roll his eyes as he remembered how he met Tiamat. Well, that's a story that's in the past. Still, no one dares to get too close there except for a few family members. Sounds a bit scary, but exciting at the same time. Gasper commented, clenching his fists tightly while undoing the magic robe. Count me in. In one of the Kuo Academy's teacher residences. Issei entered the small apartment, completely amazed at the foreign details, denoting that Penemu also liked the French and Anglo-Saxon style. Somewhat similar to Azazel, though he was noted for a slightly more modern design and only took notice of England today. After seeing your room, I didn't think you had this kind of taste, Issei clarified, completely immersed in the decor. Well, I couldn't bring all my swords here, so was the cadre's simple comment, sitting down on the bed. Issei couldn't help but notice that the apartment was so small that the kitchen and the bed were in the same room, and the only thing that had a separate room seemed to be the bathroom. Cadre patted her side a couple of times, indicating for him to sit next to her. I want to train Gasper in the family realm. He commented, sitting down next to her. In the family realm? The cadre asked. Are you sure? It's a very hostile place, and I'm sure he'll be very uncomfortable. That's exactly why I'm taking him there. Issei clarified, causing a small smile to appear on the fallen's face. You've gotten very smart, Issei. Penemu complimented him, giving him a small kiss on his cheek, causing Issei to blush slightly. I wonder whose fault that is? He asked while looking at her with a small smile. Penemu only managed to cover her mouth to keep her little giggle from being more audible, something that made her look even cuter. Well, I guess I'll be going. Issei said, getting up only to be stopped by Penemu as she tugged lightly on his sleeve. Don't forget about your studies. More than a reminder, it sounded like a command, and her look only affirmed this fact. Issei couldn't help but get slightly nervous at her gaze. Don't worry. We'll go with Gasper after the academy. Hearing this, Penemu nodded with satisfaction and let him go. At the Haidu's house. I'm home. Issei commented, seeing that his parents didn't seem to have given him a degree of importance as they continued to read the newspaper. Issei saw that they hadn't even left him dinner, so he let out a big sigh. He was destined to go upstairs to his room but stopped in the middle of the stairs. Tomorrow is the day where the parents go to the academy. Issei commented without even looking at them. Could they at least take some time for me tomorrow? He asked. Seconds passed and he got no answer, causing him to lower his head a little. I figured, he whispered under his breath, going to his room. When he entered his room, the first thing he saw was Tiamat sitting on his bed. How was it? The dragoness asked, moving a little to the side to make room for Issei. It wasn't bad. Issei replied, sitting down next to her. I think he has a big confidence problem, but he's a good kid. Apparently, demonic corruption doesn't affect him, which is strange. I told you he seemed to be broken, the dragoness replied. Most likely something went wrong when he was reincarnated. Asper had said something about that, but he didn't give many details. I don't think he must know the specific reason either. Issei replied, remembering the talk with the blonde. Asper? Tiamat asked, cocking her head curiously. That's his name. Issei replied. I see, the dragoness replied, then quirked a small smile as she heard Issei's stomach make a strange sound. I'm sorry, I just didn't eat anything. He replied, completely embarrassed. No worries. The dragoness replied, clasping her hands together as a small magic circle appeared. I prepared something for you. She concluded, causing Issei to widen his eyes like crazy as he watched as a plate of hot food came out of the magic circle and fell into Tiamat's hands, who handed it to him carefully. Tiamat, you're the best. Issei exclaimed as comical tears streamed down his face. She just gave him a cute smile after his words, where the tips of her beautiful fangs could be seen. This is delicious. He shouted as he ate like crazy. Damn, I think you became a much better cook than me. He raised his gaze for a short second, looking at her with great admiration. You're just wonderful. He concluded, causing a small blush to appear on Tiamat's face. Issei continued to eat like crazy, but stopped drastically when the dragoness lifted his face with her hands and gave him a kiss on the forehead. Eat more quietly, or you'll choke. She commented with a small smile, while that slight blush still covered her face, giving him a beautiful look. Issei could do nothing but blush as he slowly nodded. At that moment, she realized that there was something strange in the atmosphere. He quickly swallowed the food and began sniffing as if he were a dog. Wait a minute, what's that smell? Tiamat thought, clearly nervous. It's a strange smell, Issei commented. It's a new perfume. She quickly replied, causing Issei to look at her with a raised eyebrow. I adorned it in your room. I hope you like it. It was clearly a perfect excuse. It's very nice. Issei replied with a smile. It's a very nice smell. He continued, causing Tiamat to put her hands to her cheeks to cover the huge blush that had formed. What's the perfume? I'd like to buy it. He finished, handing her a big smile. Shibu, Tiamat muttered in a very low tone as she looked away. What? Issei asked, rubbing his hair. Tiamat looked at him again, still covering her cheeks. It's a secret. The next day. Silent laughter could be heard in the early hours of the morning in the Haidu residence. Said sounds were coming from one room in particular. Wait, don't touch me there. The dragoness's voice was easily made out through the door. I'm so ticklish. She added, as the noise of the bed squeaking could be heard very easily. Finally, the image of Issei falling on Tiamat could be visualized. I win. Commented the man with a victorious smile on his face as he watched Tiamat gasp beneath him because of her erratic breathing. It was in these moments that Drake wondered how his partner could not have any obscene thoughts, being that he has the most beautiful dragoness in her underwear, panting with a small blush on her face as she was completely at his mercy. I surrender. The dragoness exclaimed between gasps, only to see Issei move to the side, releasing her. Will you introduce me to your new friend? The dragoness asked, taking not even a second to settle her head on his chest. No. Was Issei's reply, beginning to stroke the woman's hair. I have a plan, and I need your help. He finished, causing the dragoness to raise her face a little, looking at him curiously. What is it about? Issei opened his eyes with difficulty, only to look from one side to the other, upon discovering that he was in a completely dark place. Where am I? Wondered the young man, who didn't have much time to search for an answer, as hands rested on his shoulders. Such delicate hands that it was impossible to forget them. Issei turned around quickly, giving an instant smile to the two women he loved most in this world. Tiamat and Penemu hugged him, something Issei responded to instantly as he looked at the large photo of his birthday above the heads of the cadre and the dragoness, unable to help but widen his smile at the memory. How had they managed to make him happy in such a short time? It was something he was still trying to understand, but he didn't really care. He didn't mind, as long as they were near him. Issei's gaze twisted to an incredulous look as the photo burst into flames and burned practically instantly. At that moment, Issei's gaze was mixed in a great deal of horror and hatred as Tiamat and Penemu transformed into Rainer, who gave him a ghastly smile and proceeded to say. Would you die for me? Issei jolted awake as he was breathing very shakily and a heavy sweat covered his entire face. He quickly grabbed his head in a poor attempt to deal with what his body was feeling right now. Tiamat's voice was heard as she peeked her face out from under the sheets. Don't leave me, the sleeping dragoness commented as she snuggled even more into Issei with a face that appeared to be quite hurt. Seeing this, Issei put her sleep aside for a moment and proceeded to arrange the hair covering the dragoness's face. I'm not going anywhere. He whispered to her. I'll just make breakfast. Wait for me in bed. A small smile appeared on the dragoness's face after his words and she said something that caught him a little off guard. I love you very much, Issei. Issei stared at her for a few seconds until he finally smiled at her. Me too, Tiamat. He returned the sentiment, unable to control himself as he gave her a kiss on the cheek. When the dragoness got like this, she was too tender to resist. I'll be back in a minute. Issei stated, rising from the bed and causing Tiamat to frown as she felt the usual warmth leave her. Still, it wasn't strong enough to wake her up. Probably because of the words he had delivered to her earlier. Issei started to walk down the stairs, only to lean against the railing and clutch his stomach tightly because the dream he had was still tormenting him. Shit, here it comes again, he thought, as his eyes started to shake and form tears, which didn't take long to fall. Whenever I'm with them I'm very happy, and I'm very glad to see that the cold attitude has already vanished in them, although Penemu is still so serious, but on many occasions she shows me her feelings, and her smile. Issei couldn't help but clench his stomach even tighter as the most beautiful smiles of both women flashed through his head. Shit, their smiles, I get so happy just remembering them, Issei gritted his teeth as the tears began to fall faster. Still, even so, this feeling still comes from time to time, a feeling of unbearable pain and emptiness. He thought, leaning his forehead on the railing. First it started with Tiamat and now Penemu joins in too. It's like some kind of price I have to pay for being so happy. Now that the two of them make me so happy, these unpleasant feelings became twice as strong every time they appear. Again with your sorrows, mate? Drake asked with a clear worried tone, receiving a forced nod from Issei. This is the fault of your trauma. Your dragon emotions are quite problematic under these circumstances. But what do the two of them have to do with Rainer? Issei exclaimed rather annoyed, hitting the railing hard. Rainer was a fucking bitch, well Tiamat and Penemu are the women I hold most dear in this life. As I told you the first time, it's something you must discover on your own, the dragon commented earnestly. But, you mustn't let it get the better of you. After all, you could suffer even greater mental breakdowns in the future. It's very dangerous, as you could activate your juggernaut drive out of sheer desperation and rage. Issei stopped shaking and gave a big sigh. You're right, Issei raised his gaze, slapping his forehead hard against the railing, holding back his tears. Still, I assure you I will find the answer to what torments me. I'm sure it is. The dragon commented to himself, then raised his gaze. The question is, at what point will it be? And, whether that feeling will increase even more with possible arrivals of other women he loves. Drake closed his eyes quietly, crossing his arms. But seeing his character and growing personality, I doubt he'll manage to fall in love with more than 4 women. A small smile appeared on the dragon's face as he opened his eyes. Now that I remember, 4 women is the average number of wives a dragon has. Perhaps, I'm just wishing there were 4 so he has another similar point with dragons. He concluded, then laughed at his own words. But what am I saying? He's a reincarnated demon, not a dragon. Chapter 30. New Teachings in the Family Realm. Issei entered the old academy building to see how their president was sitting at the desk, which now actually belonged to Azazel, due to the fact that he was the one instructing them. Putting that aside, you could see that the Redeed had a face that was not at all sympathetic. Do you know what happened to the seals in the Forbidden Room? The question quickly clarified the cause of her mood. In fact, that's why I asked you to come before class. Issei commented, putting his hands in his pockets and leaning against the door. Are you telling me it was you? Riaz frowned. I had strictly told you that. You never told me there was a child locked in there. He interrupted her, causing Riaz to grit her teeth slightly. Don't change the subject. The Redeed exclaimed, pounding the desk. No. He confronted her instantly. You don't change the subject. He raised his tone of voice, clearly annoyed, causing Riaz to be surprised by an attitude she had rarely, if ever, seen in Issei. How can you keep someone locked up for years? Look, Riaz gave a small sigh, calming down completely. It's kind of hard to understand. That's why I'm asking you. Issei insisted, stomping his feet impatiently. Your piece is mutated and that makes it different from us. It's dangerous. Riaz explained, causing Issei to raise an eyebrow. He didn't evolve like any reincarnated demon would and we can't help him for that reason. Is he dangerous because he's different from us? Issei asked, then asked another question. What's different about him? That he's a kid who's scared to talk to his own shadow. That he's been made to believe he's dangerous to everyone. That he has a bit of a troublesome power unlike us. Issei couldn't help but frown again. Is that all they locked him up for? Did they even try to do anything before? Did they even try to understand him? We don't understand human problems very well. That's why we're demons. Riaz explained with a frown. Hearing the answer, Issei couldn't help but raise both eyebrows. And according to you, what makes us different? He asked, causing Riaz to widen her eyes. The Redeed thought, realizing she had spoken out of turn when she was harassed by the questions. That doesn't matter. Furthermore, at what point did you become a questioner? The president asked, deflecting the topic. Issei simply took a step forward and looked at her seriously. I started asking myself questions because answers are necessary to understand contexts. He concluded, stepping past Riaz. Apparently, the young woman had not discovered the true meaning behind his words. If she had noticed, she would have learned that she was farther away than she thought from being able to manipulate him again. Where are you going? The Redeed asked, curious. I'm going to go check on him. Was Issei's simple reply, causing Riaz to frown. I forbid you. We'll put seals back on. He's someone very dangerous. She ordered, only to widen her eyes as Issei continued to move forward, giving her words no importance. Issei, I am your mistress. You must abide by everything I tell you. If no one's going to help him, I'll help him, Riaz. Issei shouted, causing the young woman's body to shudder at the sound of Issei not telling her president, and the shudder only increased with the sidelong glance her servant delivered. It's okay, I understand. Riaz replied quickly. But there's no need for you to be like this. Issei just sighed at what he heard. No need. Issei shook his head in clear disappointment. I shouldn't have yelled at you, I'm sorry. But, your words are too stinging. Issei said it the best way he could think of due to the fact that he didn't want to make Riaz angry either. As long as he left Gasper in his hands, there was no need to create a conflict between them. Though that didn't mean he still held her on the same pedestal as always. I get it, you're right. Riaz replied with a smile. I'm sorry too. I guess I should have tried harder. Issei just smiled at her words, thinking that the retreat had realized her mistake. Finally, Issei disappeared from her sight, causing Ria's smile to fade, and she will take her head in annoyance. I almost ruined everything, she whispered under her breath, rubbing her hair. But what the hell happened to Haidu? She bit her thumb. Why did he change so suddenly? He used to be so much more manipulable. She thought, then became very serious. I'd better act as quickly as possible. Otherwise, I might not make it in time due to Issei losing all his ignorance. That was what she thought, even though she couldn't even do anything about it now. Not because she was unattractive, but because Issei already had two beautiful and wonderful women whom he loved with all his being, although he still didn't want to realize it. An hour later. Issei was sitting in his chair with great boredom. He only deigned to watch as all his classmates were with their parents, except him, because they were too busy to attend to him. The first few times it happened at his other schools he felt great embarrassment, but currently, that embarrassment had been replaced by annoyance. Issei couldn't wander much further in his thoughts, as he looked up with quite a bit of surprise to see Tiamat and Penemu walking in, greeting the parents and teacher. Finally, they stopped beside him, and both gave him a small smile. In Penemu's case, it was barely distinguishable. What are you girls doing here? Issei asked, rather intrigued. We don't have regular classes today. You two didn't have to come. She explained, causing him to become even more confused as the two women spread their smiles a little wider. You see, since we're both 25 and one is living with you, Penemu commented. We thought it would be a good idea to sign us up as your tutors. That way, you won't be alone. Tiamat completed the cadre's idea. From one second to the next, Issei's face lit up with great drama as comical tears streamed down his face. They're the best. He exclaimed, hugging them both tightly. This caused everyone to look at him uncertainly. Still, none of the three of them boasted at the looks, as they were very much in sympathy in the very affectionate embrace. After a few minutes, the teacher and parents alighted at the front of the room, as everyone listened intently to what he was about to say. Before we start with the art class, we would like everyone to share their wishes once they become adults. The teacher commented, causing Issei to roll his eyes, because he was already 18, and technically, already an adult. Though he understood that the man was referring to a wish even further down the road. To begin with, we'll start with the ladies. The professor was naming the girls one by one, causing Issei to start sweating more and more at the same answers. When I grow up, I want to marry someone handsome and tall who has a lot of money. Some added various university or tertiary studies, but every conclusion was the same. Are all the girls in my salon so materialistic? Issei thought aloud, making Aika hear him. Not all of them. The young woman commented, adjusting her glasses with a smile. Some of them already really think about what they want the future holds for them, not dreams of princesses and all that crap. She concluded, causing Issei to nod. Still, it was disturbing to see that so many women of his grade seemed to have little brains. In fact, he probably wouldn't have much of a brain too if he'd never gone into the supernatural world, so he couldn't complain either. He also began to wonder if Penemu and Tiamat were materialistic for some strange reason. He didn't know why that thought crossed his mind, though he quickly answered it with a negative, as the women's attitude seemed to be the complete opposite of materialism. In fact, Penemu bathes in money, and he had never seen her buy herself things out of the ordinary, except for that maid's outfit, which she only bought for him. That last made a smile cross his face at the memory. Hi do Issei. The aforementioned woke up from his infused sleep when he heard the professor say his name. What is your wish in the future? The man asked, raising an eyebrow. At that moment, he felt many gazes fall on him, mainly those of Mitsuda, Motohama, Tiamat and Penemu. A small smile appeared on Issei's face. Well, my first wish is to defeat Tiamat in a match and win the bet. My second wish is to save as many as I can and try to rewrite the prophecy of the apocalypse. And my third wish is to succeed in triumphing in the battle against Vali by myself, without any help, he thought, shaking his head slightly. But, obviously, I can't say that or I'd be taken for a madman. All I know is that all those desires with led to one and the same feeling. Issei raised his gaze and gave the professor a smile. My wish for the future is to be happy. Everyone smiled at his answer, even the professor himself nodded several times. Something concise, but very practical. Commented the professor. I like it. I hope you have luck with it. He concluded, then looked at Mitsuda. How about you, Mitsuda? After everyone expressed their wishes, the art class finally started. And again, Issei had to make a sculpture, though instead of using ice, this time it was another material. Think of something you like. Issei remembered Tiamat's words, so he raised his hands on the sculpture that resembled a ball of clay at that moment. He closed his eyes deeply and let his mind flow. Something I like, he thought, frowning slightly. I already did Tiamat, so, this time Issei's mind began to flood with memories next to Penemu. Her always serious look. Her tears. Her beautiful smiles. And, finally, he remembered the first time he saw her in the cursed forest, together with the first confrontation they had. Her black robe that completely covered her body. He remembered it perfectly. He had to admit that she looked quite beautiful when she made her combat stance with her katana. Issei opened his eyes wide as many gasps came into the room. He lowered his gaze, seeing that he had made Penemu's figure in perfect detail. It looked exactly like her when they faced each other that time. Penemu could observe the sculpture from afar, so she couldn't help but blink several times in great surprise. At that moment, Tiamat whispered something in her ear. The dragoness's words had made Penemu lower her face a little to try to cover the small blush that was drawn on her cheeks. Surely Tiamat had told her how it was that Issei got that inspiration and talent when he was thinking about something he really liked. "Hey Issei," Mitsuda exclaimed, pulling out a porn magazine. "Make one of these for me." The bald man pointed to the image of a naked woman and shortly after was hit on the head by Murayama. Several minutes later. "It's very pretty," Penemu commented, holding the small statuette in a very delicate way with her two hands, as if it would break with a simple blow. Although it was almost impossible to witness, she was smiling. The three of them were behind a tree in the courtyard, a little away from the others. "What can I say?" Issei commented, rubbing his hair with a smile. "I try to do the best I can." "I have one too," Tiamat added, raising her hands and causing a small magic circle to appear and drop the statuette from her. "You still keep it?" Issei asked, quite surprised at the revelation. "Of course I do," the dragoness exclaimed with a beautiful smile as she pressed the statuette to her chest. "It's a gift from you, after all," she concluded, causing Issei to rub his hair again at her heartfelt words. Some time later. The large crowd was rushing towards the gym when a supposed idol had arrived at Kuo Academy. Issei was practically dragged along by his two best friends, although to be honest, he was mildly curious. After learning that she was Sona's sister, by the name of Serafal, he couldn't help but be a bit impressed to see another Mayu, especially that she looked so young and moreover, have a rather boyish yet seductive attitude, as she attracted even women with the way she was. Something a bit strange according to Issei, although he didn't care too much about it either. After all, he was much more attuned to another image. How come they can like him so much? Issei thought with a smile as he watched outwards as Tiamat and Penemu stood under a tree, talking very excitedly about their own sculptures. "Perhaps I should give them a gift," he concluded, raising his smile a bit more as he saw how the two women seemed to get along very well. After all, they were almost all the time together. "Hey Issei," Mitsuda yelled at him. "Are you listening to me?" The aforementioned couldn't help but look at him confused. "We were just discussing if it's a perfect cosplay," Motohama explained, adjusting his glasses. "I think it's perfect. But he says it would be perfect only if Serafal were smaller." "I think she's fine," was Issei's simple reply, causing Motohama to deliver a triumphant smile to Mitsuda, who only deigned to grit his teeth in defense. In the family realm. Asper stared at the outside of the cave in awe. It was only natural, since he had not left that room in years and he had never visited hell. The colors of the forest where the familiars lived were extremely different from the forests that could be seen on Earth. The vampire turned around to watch as Issei prepared a small campfire while he pulled some juice boxes and sandwiches from his backpack. Gasper couldn't help but look at him rather curiously as a rather sentimental look came over him. "What's wrong?" he asked, causing Issei to look at him for a short second, then look back inside the cave. "Did you know this place was covered in ice before?" Issei responded with another question, causing Gasper's eyes to light up. "That ice wasn't natural. It was generated by my first mistress. Let's just say she didn't like living with others very much and she was also quite territorial back then," he commented, then chuckled for a second as he recalled how they met. "In fact, when I came into the area because of an argument I had with Drake, that's when I met her and she obviously wanted to kill me. Although, she also had her own reasons for wanting me dead, or rather, Drake's death." Gasper couldn't help but sit down next to him as he listened to the story, waiting for him to tell him more, something Issei noticed. "Let's just say I was saved by a miracle. And, after that, she let me go," though after seeing her face, seeing that she was so lonely, Issei remembered Tiamat's expressionless face on that occasion, though she could not hide the great loneliness conveyed by her beautiful light blue eyes. "So, I decided to stay a couple of days with her." Tiamat did not deny that she was very grateful at such a fact, so she decided to train me as a token of her gratitude. Issei handed a couple of sandwiches to Gasper, who began to eat them unconsciously as he continued to listen to the story. In the end, those days turned into a long month because of a certain circumstance. She taught me how to fight and take advantage of my opponent's flaws, as well as giving me my first orientations in the supernatural world and telling me different lessons so that I would learn how to survive in this world. Issei squeezed the juice box, then threw it into the fire. Even though it had been a while since my reincarnation back then, I felt that it was only in those moments that I settled into the supernatural world, and that's what it really meant to be a part of it. Issei stood up, being quickly followed by Gasper. "And what was that circumstance you had mentioned earlier?" he asked, rather excited at the thought of hearing another great story. "Well, it's another long story," Issei commented, approaching the forest. "You see, there was a guy named Razor." Issei continued to tell his story as he wandered deeper into the side along with the half-vampire. Several hours later. "Does she keep coming back to that dark cave even though she already lives with you?" Gasper asked in slight disbelief as he went about observing all the vegetation in general. The vampire was carrying a large amount of fruit in his backpack, indicating that they had been gathering food for the night. "I didn't understand it at first either. But when I got back to the cave, it was like a revelation to me." Issei paused, giving him a smile that surprised Gasper. After all, it was in that place that she abandoned her loneliness and where she experienced her first happy moments after a long time. "Luckily, I have Mitsuda and Motohama, but still, going back to that place gave me a pretty big nostalgic pang, being that it's only been a few months since I was last there." Gasper paused for a short second, then nodded with a smile. "I think I understand." "I'm sure you understand." Issei replied, looking straight ahead as he heard a strange movement. "After all, you went through circumstances very similar to mine and hers." Before Gasper could say anything else, his eyes widened as feline beasts began to approach the duo with not at all friendly intentions. The vampire was no fool and he could pick up on those intentions, but… "Stay away," he whispered under his breath. "I don't want to hurt them." Gasper's eyes widened as a deep crimson glow took over the atmosphere for a short second, only to see Issei take several steps forward with his balance breaker activated. Issei shadowed his gaze and lowered his face, causing a rather imposing crimson aura to completely surround him. The beasts began to recoil in fear at such a powerful presence and quickly fled. Seeing this, Issei undid his armor and looked at him with slight concern. "Are you alright?" he asked her. Gasper couldn't help but look down sadly. "I'm sorry to be a bother." Hearing his words, Issei reached over and placed a hand on his shoulder, causing the vampire to raise his gaze. "You're learning, you're no bother," he replied, causing a small smile to appear on the vampire's face. "This place is pretty hostile, so if they approach you with bad intentions, don't be afraid to give them a beating. After all, they're asking for it," Issei exclaimed, giving a thumbs up in response. Gasper couldn't help but lower his gaze again. "But, I don't want to hurt." "No problem." Issei interrupted him, adding a toothy grin to his raised thumb. "In that case, I'll protect you." Hearing those words, a big smile appeared on the vampire's face. As they continued their passage into the forest, Issei couldn't help but pause for a short second to say a few final words to him on the subject. "Still, there will be times when I will need you to protect me." Gasper couldn't help but widen his eyes at his words. "Not just me, I'm sure you'll find more people valuable to you who will be in danger and you'll need to protect them, or both of you have each other's backs, it depends on the situation. That's the way the world we live in is, and if you don't adapt to it, you might regret it in the future." He concluded without even looking him in the face, then moved on. Gasper stood pondering at his words for a few seconds before following him again. A few hours later, back in the cave. The only light present was that of the campfire as darkness had settled over the huge forest of the familiars. "Wow, the black-haired woman is amazing," Gasper exclaimed as he ate with a great gleam in his eyes. "Her name is Penemu," Issei commented graciously, imagining how the cadre would react if she had even heard Gasper at this moment. The talk about his second mistress was interrupted with a small grunt, followed by a loud lump that hit Issei's chest and knocked him to the ground. Gasper couldn't help but jump in fear, only to see that it was a small dragoness. "Oh, it's you," Issei exclaimed, patting the little girl's head happily. "It was already weird to me that you didn't show up all day." Gasper only deigned to watch the interaction between the two with quite a bit of amazement. "You shouldn't be afraid of her, she's a friend," Issei commented, causing the little dragon to turn her gaze to the vampire. She tried to approach, but Gasper took several steps back due to her condition. "Why are you afraid?" Issei asked, causing them both to look at him, especially Gasper. "She's not going to hurt you." "Then why should you, are you afraid to do it by accident?" A small smile appeared on Issei's face as the vampire nodded. "In that case, I should have died a long time ago by now." The young man stood up and folded his arms. They made you believe that you can't control your power, in fact, you can't, but you are the one who decides whether you should activate it or not. When you activate it, you do so simply to put a shield between you and that person, due to your distrust of that entity and yourself. Issei gave him a big chuckling smile. Don't you think it's time to change that? Asper looked at him with some distrust for several seconds, then nodded. He shut his eyes tightly as the little dragoness began sniffing at him. Finally, he snapped his eyes open thanks to the fact that the little one was insisting with her snout that he pet her head. The vampire simply raised his hand and laid it on top of the dragoness's head so that she herself then lay down on Gasper's lap and began to sleep peacefully. You see? Issei commented, sitting down next to him. It's not that bad. Gasper simply nodded with a big smile. At Kuo Academy. I already brought him back, as promised. Issei said as he stood leaning on the edge of the terrace of the old building, along with Rias. Yes, and I see things went well, as he seemed happy. Was the Redeed's simple reply as she looked up at the stars. How much time do you think he needs? If everything goes as planned, in a few weeks he can be in Kuo. Issei replied. I see Rias lowered her gaze, looking at him for a short second. Issei, what do you think about love? Issei couldn't help but look at her rather uncertainly after the topic. Well, that's rather sudden. Issei rubbed his cheek, thinking carefully. I guess can it be good and bad? Rather than an answer, it was a question, making it quite clear that he had no idea about it. I mean, I had very bad experiences, just like you. But, I think if you pick the right person, it could be something. Issei raised his gaze, and although he didn't know why, the image of Penemu and Tiamat crossed his mind for a short second. Indescribable was the answer, something that surprised Rias as she noticed the depth in that word. I guess you're right, Rias replied, then smiled. What kind of woman would you like to fall in love with? What kind? Issei couldn't help but repeat the question, thinking carefully. Well, personally, I don't like to think about that kind of thing at all because of what happened to me. But, I guess my thoughts are still the same as before. I think. Issei couldn't help but raise an eyebrow as he hadn't thought about love for several months now. I've always been very fond of women who have an excellent physique, although the answer was quite obvious. Issei began to doubt his own words due to the fact that he was realizing that it had been a long time since he had felt any kind of physical attraction towards women, with the exception of occasional instances. That didn't mean he had become less of a man, he just felt that his tastes had changed, or had they? It was all very confusing to him, as the faces and personalities of Tiamat and Penemu was something he might consider somewhat attractive now, but the bodies of the two of them were also heart-stopping, and he was no fool to overlook that. But, the weirdness begins when he can only think of the two of them, as if there were no other women in the world, due to the fact that the dragoness and the cadre had no point of comparison in any of the ways he thought before. Why were the two of them so beautiful? Why were the two of them so perfect? Yes, it was very strange. Do you find me attractive? Rias asked, not realizing that Issei was too deep in thought to answer her truthfully. Yes. Was Issei's simple reply as he continued to think about Tiamat and Penemu. Which part? She asked, genuinely interested in the answer. Physique, personality, or character? Issei asked, squinting as a mental image of her pretty dragoness smiling popped into his mind. Physical? Rias asked, genuinely amazed that Issei was being so blunt as he didn't seem like that kind of person. The butt? Was the young man's immediate response, remembering Tiamat's large, smooth, delicious, and shapely ass. Even though the dragoness had bigger and much better breasts than Ria's, he still thought her ass was something frankly unmatched. Kind of like Penemu's breasts. The butt? Rias couldn't help but wonder internally as she looked at herself. I thought my breasts were much better than my ass, she concluded, genuinely amazed at the response she received. Would you like to have dinner today? Rias asked, causing Issei to finally wake up from his thoughts. I mean, we're master and servant and we've interacted almost nothing with each other. And, it's been several months since you've joined the nobility. To me, you are my faithful comrades. Issei replied with a small smile. Although I no longer owe you my life, nothing would have been possible without you, so we don't need to interact with each other to get along, because we already do. Issei turned back to the moon, unable to help but smile. But, you're right. It wouldn't hurt to have dinner at my place. I'm sure my parents wouldn't mind. He concluded, causing a big smile to appear on the Redeed's face. See you in an hour then. She exclaimed happily, waving goodbye to Issei, who simply waved back. I guess I should be going too, he said to himself, putting his hands in his pockets and leaving the terrace. At the Haidu residence. Dad, Mom. Issei shouted, seeing that there was no one in the house. Damn, Issei thought with slight annoyance. At least, they could let me know when they take those work trips, he concluded, then looked towards the stairs and sketched a small smile. Apparently, Tiamat is still with Penemu, he thought aloud, unable to help but widen his smile. It's amazing to see how both of them have become so close. Especially for them, who have always been so lonely, he finished, then looking at the large amount of leftover material from the academy still lying on the table. Before making dinner, maybe I should make that gift. He thought, taking the material stored in the bag, as he grabbed his photo album and went upstairs to the room to start working. An hour later. It smells really good, Riaz commented with a smile, entering the Haidu residence. Thank you. Issei thanked, leading her into the kitchen. Are you alone? Riaz asked, seeing that no one was there. My parents went on a trip and Tiamat is still with Penemu. Issei replied, only to see Riaz pause. That's much better for me, she thought with a slight tone, as she handed a small glance to her bag. Would you tell me where the bathroom is? Yes, it's this way. The young man replied, guiding her. Issei sat down, serving the food on both plates, only to look at Riaz with quite a bit of astonishment as she returned to the kitchen. Riaz was wearing a rather extravagant black garment. A fabric acting as a collar around her neck was detaching a small linear fabric that crossed over her bra and ended up joining another equally thin fabric a little above her navel. From there, different folds were detached to expose her navel, in addition to two other bras that were in charge of holding the long transparent stockings. The dress also featured panties, which, like the bra, were linked to the dress, making it all one. Much of the fabric was quite sheer, except for key places. How do I look? She asked, turning on herself, causing Issei to be able to see that another bra came out from her nape to her panties and acted like lace. Is that lingerie? Issei asked, unable to help but raise an eyebrow. Why did you bring that? Hearing the young man's question, Riaz could feel her plan slowly breaking down. Well, I simply wanted to show it to you, because I thought. Issei waved his hand dismissively. It's not that bad, but it really makes me uncomfortable to see you like that. Issei found the nicest way to tell her, not to mention that she was disgusted by it. Probably, that disgust towards women's bodies had been created when he promised himself that he would never fall into lustful desires again. Well, he thought so, since he has been seen thinking a couple of times in a not-so-holy way about Tiamat and Penemu, though the instances have been rather rare. That last only makes it funnier that someone like Riaz thought she could get his attention, if even the two women he considers most beautiful haven't had much of an effect on him. Can you change? Of course, I just wanted to show you. Riaz commented with a rather nervous smile on her face, seeing that nothing had turned out the way she wanted. I haven't liked that kind of outfit for quite some time now. It's not something owed by you, it's something personal. Issei clarified at last, making the Riti not feel so bad. If it's that you're looking to impress a man you like, maybe you should talk to Akeno about it, she's more clear about it. Issei deduced, due to the fact that he could not find any other explanation for Riaz to show up in those outfits. Finally, Riaz changed and let out a big sigh before throwing the lingerie into the trash can that was in the living room. Her plan had failed, but she also realized that she had gone too fast and that she didn't know Issei's current tastes, so it would be best to act more cautiously from now on. They both had dinner together in what seemed like great progress to Riaz, as Issei seemed to be quite content with her presence, plus he seemed not to be bothered by her little incitements. What Riaz didn't know was that Issei was very bad at such matters because of his trauma in the past, which made him believe that no woman could ever be interested in someone like him. Therefore, he wasn't responding to her at all. He was simply being courteous. A few hours later. Riaz had finally left and Issei had already finished the gifts to the two women he loved so much. Speaking of that. Issei looked towards the door when he heard it being opened and quickly made his way there to see Penemu and Tiamat, who seemed to be talking very happily to each other. Welcome. Issei exclaimed, with a big grin between his teeth, also giving a quick wave to Penemu, who replied with her usual low energy, though the smile on her face indicated that she was quite happy at the moment. How did everything turn out? Tiamat asked, patting Issei's face with both of her hands. All good. Issei replied with a bit of effort due to the Dragoness's hands. You? Tiamat broke off, unable to help but laugh. I've been helping him cook a little. She commented, looking at her with a face full of grace. You should have seen her, she almost set her whole apartment on fire. She exclaimed, causing a huge blush of embarrassment to shoot across the cadre's face. That's why I always order food, she whispered slightly sheepishly as she averted her gaze to the side, causing them both to chuckle. Before you go, let me give you a gift. Issei stated, causing Penemu to look at him with great curiosity. Issei pulled a statuette out of the bag where she, Tiamat and he were standing. This is when we celebrated my birthday. He stated, seeing that the three figures were in exactly the same pose in that picture. Since you like the sculpture I made you so much, I thought this would be a good idea. He finished, handing it to her. Enemu received it with both of her hands open, causing a great glow to break out in her crimson eyes when she saw that the sentiment-filled expression of the three of them was perfectly captured. A beautiful smile covered Penemu's face as she pressed the sculpture against her breasts. "That's very pretty. Thank you." She thanked with great sincerity, causing the young man to give her a toothy smile in response. "I have one for you too, Tiamat," he commented, pulling the last one out of the bag and handing it over. "That way, you won't have to worry if it thaws," he concluded, watching as a gleam ran through her eyes, much like Penemu's. "I'll really appreciate it," the dragoness stated with a beautiful smile on her face, causing Issei to give both thumbs up in response. The next day. Issei opened his tired eyes, only to see a huge bulge rise up on his own hips. The sheets were pulled back, revealing the beautiful dragoness stretching her body and giving a small yawn. "How odd that you're awake," Issei teased, remembering that Tiamat almost never usually woke up this early in the morning. Now that he thought about it, this habit Tiamat had picked up of sleeping with him was rather pleasant. Strange to think that the need to sleep together in that cave because of the cold became such a routine thing in the future, even if there was no real need at present. "I can't help it," the dragoness replied, fixing the hair that covered her face. "It's too comfortable and warm." It was her simple reply that made Issei shake his head, who looked amused at what he heard. Issei tried to get up, but Tiamat stopped him with her soft hands pressing against his chest. "I want to return the favor from yesterday," the dragoness commented, giving him a beautiful smile. "Let me make you breakfast." Issei leaned back on the bed and smiled. "Very well, it's all yours." Tiamat came downstairs in full underwear, not caring about the fact of what that meant since Issei's parents were gone and all the curtains were closed. If she missed anything about her past life, it was the fact that she could walk around naked in her human form everywhere without anyone saying anything to her. After all, that was what dragons were like. While Tiamat waited for the water to heat up, she observed herself in the mirror in the living room, so she couldn't help but take the statuette where the three of them were together and put it in the mirror, seeing that she looked exactly the same. She stood like that for a short second until she visualized something strange in the trash can thanks to the mirror. "What is this?" the dragoness wondered aloud, pulling back the lingerie outfit Riaz had worn the night before. "Is it some kind of underwear?" she wondered, looking at it in more detail, slightly surprised by the details of it. "I like it," she concluded with a small smile. Issei hurried to tie his belt, unable to help but look at himself in the mirror. "I have plenty of money to buy more clothes, but I've gotten too used to wearing the academy clothes," Issei thought with a small drop of nervous sweat. "Issei, did I bring you breakfast or are you coming?" "I'll be right down," she quickly replied, putting on her footwear at the speed of light, then descending the stairs just as quickly. Issei couldn't help but put on a silly expression as he sniffed the sweet aroma of the food. "I hope you like it," the dragoness declared with a big smile, placing a tray on the table. When he saw her, Issei's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "Wwwhwa what?" Issei pointed at her shamelessly, causing Tiamat to look down at herself. "Ah, this?" she wondered, pointing to the lingerie she was wearing. "It's some underwear I saw in the trash. I thought it looked cute enough to throw away," she commented with total innocence. "Although, I must say, it's pretty tight on me." She brought her hand to the top of her giant cleavage, where her breasts were threatening to explode the fabric. Issei's eyes could only stop at that very spot, as it was so tight that the dragoness's nipples were completely molded into the cloth. "Though I must say, it's much tighter here." She half turned around, pointing to her butt, where Issei's face turned completely red as he saw how the cloth was sagging in the middle of her buttocks almost completely. Especially, on account of it being so thin. She concluded, pulling the thin fabric out from between her buttocks, then releasing it and making her ass pump in an incredibly trapping and hypnotic way. And yes, the obvious had to happen. "Boy ah!" Issei screamed and flew, crashing into the stairs after the massive amount of blood that came out of his nose. "Issei!" Tiamat shouted in great concern, rushing to him. "Are you okay?" the dragoness asked him, carrying him gently as she let his face rest on her breasts. She only became even more concerned when she saw that Issei's unconscious face was completely pale from excessive bloodshed. Issei seemed to want to wake up but only had the strength to say a couple of words, and they were as follows. "I couldn't resist neutron style." "And so, that's how the brat had a runny nose after months," Drake commented to himself with much amusement. Thank you for watching part 11 of this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing and liking the video. I hope to see you in the next video.